Hey, I've got a question for you. Do you find yourself thinking, I'm not a speaker one moment, and then, but I feel called. I feel called to serve. I feel called to share my message the next. Whew, that can be confusing. I get it. We grew up with an image of only one kind of leader, usually a man in a three-piece suit. And that outdated image of a leader really created an equally outdated image of what it means to be a quote unquote speaker. If you're drawn to this podcast, of course, that doesn't feel like you. Trying to be that outdated leader speaker would be like trying to go dancing when you've got size 12 feet in somebody else's size 5 shoes. Don't cram yourself into a box. Don't try to be that. Here's the truth. Those outdated speaker leaders are not what the world needs. You are. We need change, not more of the same. We need your voice in the conversation. We need you to own your wacky wildness so you can have a serious impact. The world stage is calling for you to share your magic in a bigger way. So, if you're feeling called to speak, and by speak, I mean everything from TikToks to TED Talks and anything and everything in between. If you're feeling called, you don't know how, you're also resistant, podcasting is a great way to start to be seen. And unless you feel called there, I don't mean go start your own podcast right now, unless you feel called. Appearing as a guest on podcast is a way to ease into an ease-filled way of stepping into the pool of being seen, of stepping into speaking your truth. It's like stepping into a warm, shallow end of that pool rather than thinking that the only way for you to get into the pool is to dive into an unheated pool deep end. With a good podcast host, it feels more like you're having coffee than you are speaking. One thing that has been happening in some cases with the Soulful Speaking podcast is some of the guests that you've heard are people who speak all of the time. Some of the guests that you've heard, and I know you don't know this, no one can tell. Some of the guests that have appeared on the Soulful Speaking podcast are doing their version of stepping into the pool. It's one of the things that I absolutely love about the Soulful Speaking podcast. I love creating intimate, safe, sacred spaces for people to tap into themselves and find their voice. And a lot of other podcast hosts out there are doing the same thing. So my request of you, if you're feeling called by this message, if this is speaking to you and you're feeling sort of curious, is to listen to your heart and soul. Go appear on a couple of people's podcasts and have fun with it. And then let me know how it goes.